Left with no alternative, a mother entrusted her 5-year-old daughter to a barely known uncle. Upon hearing her daughter's revelations about his behavior, she swiftly alerted the authorities. Subsequently, the home security video uncovered something shocking. It was supposed to be just another ordinary day, but events unfolded that would mark it as anything but typical. Claire, consumed by a storm of rage and shouting with a ferocity that echoed down the street, confronted her brother-in-law right outside his home. "How could you do such a thing to my daughter, you monster? What have you done to her?" Her words, heavy with pain and anger, cut through the air. This heated exchange occurred at the doorstep of Calvin's house. Just as the police arrived, having been promptly called to the scene, Calvin, his face a mixture of confusion and anger, retorted, "I've done nothing, Claire. You can't accuse me of such a thing without proof." The police officers, sensing the volatility of the situation, intervened in an attempt to calm both parties. "Please, let's remain calm. This is a serious accusation and needs to be handled with care," one officer asserted, trying to mediate the rapidly escalating conflict. Amidst this tense confrontation, the gentle rustling of the leaves in the breeze around them stood in stark contrast to the turmoil unfolding. Calvin, clearly shaken and his face flushed with agitation, responded defensively. "Are you out of your mind, Claire, to drag the police into this after everything I've done for this family?" His voice cracked under the strain, the veins on his neck pronounced as he grappled with the fear and implications of the accusation. Claire, tears cascading down her cheeks, was barely able to look at Calvin. Her daughter Molly, only 5 years old, lay asleep in the back seat of her car, her peaceful slumber a stark contradiction to the nightmare she had revealed to her mother. Claire's hands trembled as she replayed Molly's words in her head. "She told me everything. Calvin, you have to take him away," she implored to the police, her voice thick with despair. The police, though initially hesitant, were now prepared to take action based on the severity of the claims. Disbelief still etched on his face, Calvin demanded, "What exactly did she tell you, Claire?" Claire, struggling to speak through her tears, found it almost unbearable to voice the horrors relayed by her daughter. An officer stepped forward to clarify. "Sir, your sister-in-law alleges that you took the little girl to a dark room and asked her to touch your snake." A deafening silence followed the officer's words. Calvin's eyes widened in shock, his mouth agape as he struggled to process the accusation that his niece had made such a grave claim against him. "Sir, we need you to respond. Did you commit this act?" the officer pressed, awaiting Calvin's response amidst an atmosphere thick with tension and disbelief. During their nightly phone calls, Molly's voice seemed tense, and her laughter had faded. She began to speak less about her day and more about wanting her mom to come home early. Claire noticed these troubling signs but attributed them to the adjustment period and her daughter's longing for closer maternal presence. One evening, as Claire picked up Molly from Calvin's house, she caught a glimpse of fear in her daughter's eyes. That night, under the dim light of Molly's bedroom, amid the comforting folds of her blankets, the young girl confided in her mother about her discomfort around Calvin. Molly couldn't articulate exactly what was wrong, but she mentioned how Calvin's once warm demeanor had grown cold and his patience thin. Heartbroken and filled with dread, Claire felt an overwhelming sense of guilt for having placed her daughter in such a vulnerable position. She confronted Calvin the next day, her voice shaking as the gravity of her daughter's unhappiness weighed heavily on her. It was then that Calvin, with a somber and defeated posture, confessed to his misdeeds in a barely audible voice tinged with guilt or perhaps shame. The room fell silent as the weight of his admission hung in the air. Claire's cry of despair broke the silence, echoing the horror of the revelation. The police officers present, who had initially been there to investigate Claire's concerns discreetly, now exchanged serious looks, their hands moving closer to their holstered weapons, prepared for any necessary action. This day, which had begun like any other, had spiraled into a nightmarish reality for Claire. The expression of sheer terror and anguish on her face was indescribable, her eyes wide with shock, tears streaming down as she absorbed the enormity of Calvin's betrayal, overcome by a tumultuous mix of anger, fear, and remorse. She repeatedly murmured, "It's all my fault, it's all my fault," her sobs deep and filled with a regret that gnawed relentlessly at her heart. What had started as a hopeful change for a better future, following the devastating loss of her husband Hugh, had turned into a harrowing ordeal. Claire had found herself in a desperate situation, struggling to provide for Molly after Hugh's death left them without financial security. Calvin's offer to help had seemed like a beacon of hope. Now, it was clear that her fears and doubts about entrusting her daughter to a man they barely knew had been valid. The initial days of a parent's smooth adjustment had given way to a stark and dangerous reality, shattering the fragile new life Claire had tried to build for them. Young girl Molly came to her mother with a disturbing allegation. She claimed that her uncle Calvin had taken her into a dark room and forced her to touch his snake. Molly's mother, Claire, was shaken to her core by this news. She struggled to reconcile the man she had trusted as a supportive family member with the heinous acts her daughter described. Each detail Molly provided seemed to tighten the grip of anguish and despair around Claire's heart, causing her to break down in tears. The memory of her husband Hugh's death and the subsequent challenges of raising her daughter alone rushed back to her. Calvin, her brother-in-law, had seemed like a pillar of support during those trying times, but now, she saw that support as nothing more than a cruel illusion. The pain and betrayal were overwhelming. Claire had always made it a point to ask Molly about her day, enjoying the stories of their shared activities, but now, she learned from Molly that Calvin had led her into a dark, secluded room, sparking fear and horror in Claire about how often this might have occurred and what else might have happened. When confronted, Calvin vehemently denied the allegations, exclaiming, "I didn't do anything to Molly." "Claire, stop lying." He then insisted they review the footage from the security cameras installed throughout his house, a place Claire seldom entered beyond the threshold as she typically dropped off and picked up Molly right at the door. Despite her exhaustive routine working a physically demanding cleaning job at a large company, Claire rarely had the energy to accept Calvin's invitations to come in for a drink. "Come in for a cup of coffee, Claire," Calvin would offer each afternoon. "Oh no, Calvin, thank you, I'm really tired, we'll just go home," she would decline, focused on returning home to rest, given her fatigue. Claire had never really taken the opportunity to closely observe her surroundings at Calvin's house or notice the extensive network of cameras he had mentioned, including in the living room and bedrooms. Just as Molly had described, with determination, Claire demanded to see the previous day's camera footage, her voice quivering and eyes filled with tears. The police were called to intervene. They warned Calvin that if the recordings did not support his claims, he would be arrested immediately. Faced with this ultimatum, Calvin had to comply, and the truth would soon come to light. Determining the course of action to protect Molly and ensure justice was served, Calvin was engulfed in confusion, his face a clear reflection of his inner turmoil. As the police braced for the possibility of having to take more drastic measures, Calvin was teetering on the brink, her features marred by exhaustion and a deep sense of despair. Her eyes, burning with intense loathing, were fixed on her brother-in-law as she struggled to fathom what her daughter might have endured under his watch. The mere possibility of her child suffering a traumatic ordeal churned her stomach with dread. "Show us the recordings, Calvin," Calvin demanded, her voice a turbulent mix of fury and desperation. Calvin responded with visible irritation, his tone betraying a mixture of fear and anger as he declared his intention to retrieve his laptop. Question marks hung in the air about his emotional state. Was it fear or anger that made his voice shake in response to his sister-in-law's fiery accusations? Flanked by an officer to prevent any potential flight, Calvin fetched the laptop and re-entered the room, his movements heavy with resentment and frustration. "You'll regret questioning my integrity, Calvin, especially after everything I've done for you and Molly," he stated firmly, his eyes scanning the laptop for the footage from the previous day. With a dismissive snort, his gaze hardened, reflecting a stormy mix of fury and resentment. The watching policeman remained vigilant, ready to intervene at the slightest hint of trouble. Meanwhile, Calvin was overwhelmed by a powerful concoction of fear and anxiety, her heart pounding against her chest as if threatening to burst. She braced herself for the outcomes of this grave situation. "That's the price you pay for letting strangers into your house," Calvin muttered under his breath, his fingers trembling as they navigated the laptop's folders. His words, fueled by anger and a sense of betrayal from the family he had tried to help, struck Calvin like physical blows. Her heart constricted, Her stomach twisted in fear as the dread of what the recordings might reveal gripped her, consumed by guilt. Silent tears streamed down her cheeks as she thought to herself, "I'll never forgive myself if something has happened." She kept her eyes glued to the laptop screen, each second stretching into an eternity as she braced for the worst. Calvin, still muttering discontentedly, shot Calvin a look filled with stark contempt. "You'll owe me an apology after this," he remarked tersely before hitting the play button on the video. The room fell into a tense silence, punctuated only by the sound of the video starting to play. Despite Calvin's resentful glare that seemed to question his own innocence, Calvin ignored him, steeling herself for whatever might be revealed. Her heart raced in anticipation. The police officers too were on high alert, maintaining their professionalism but ready to act if necessary. The moment was fraught with tension as the video began to unravel the events of the previous day, dramatically altering Claire's understanding of everything. As the footage unfolded, Claire's eyes widened in shock, and she stood petrified, absorbing the scene with her daughter Molly at her side. They watched as a man and a young girl stepped into a dimly lit room, exactly as the young girl had recounted earlier. The room, revealed by a well-placed camera, was lined with shelves brimming with an array of books and numerous vials and scientific apparatus scattered across the workbenches. The air was dense with a palpable sense of earnestness and meticulous focus. Only a handful of soft lights illuminated the area, casting a gentle glow on a prominent glass enclosure within the room. Inside this enclosure, several vibrantly colored snakes moved gracefully, their shiny scales reflecting the light and adding a mesmerizing quality to the scene. This enclosure was the habitat for a species known as Xenopeltis unicolor. The young girl, with a smile of wonder, pointed towards the reptiles and exclaimed in delight, "Uncle, it's so blue." Clearly captivated by the sight, Calvin, standing beside her, began to explain each specimen. "This blue one shines in the dark, and that green one does too," he detailed, each word bringing a sparkle of fascination to the girl's eyes as she watched the serpent's fluid movements. Everyone in the room was in a state of disbelief. The presence of the snakes was a complete surprise. With a calm and reassuring smile, Calvin began to elucidate the situation to Claire and the attending police officers, eager to resolve the confusion. "I study these species for their iridescent glow," he disclosed, introducing himself as a research biologist. "Biologist," Claire repeated under her breath, taken aback. She was entirely unaware of her brother-in-law's precise profession. As she turned slightly pale, the surrounding police officers appeared equally puzzled. "My house is equipped with numerous cameras due to my research work, and I maintain 3 separate rooms that function as my laboratories. They house my valuable research equipment," Calvin explained, his voice steady. He continued to describe the particular room they were viewing. "It's kept dark because these snakes are cave dwellers by nature and prefer such environments." It turned out that Calvin's research focused on the iridescent glow of the snakes, which stemmed from a natural substance in their skin. This unique ability allowed the snakes to thrive in dark, moist environments by producing a natural coating on their skin that inhibited the growth of fungi and bacteria, common in such habitats. Turning to Claire with a direct gaze, he concluded, "This compound could be the key to developing new antibiotics." His explanation not only shed light on his research but also hinted at its potential significant impact in medical science. "In my research, which is central to my academic pursuits, I introduced my niece, Molly, to a snake, ensuring it was a non-venomous and harmless species. My intention was never to endanger her, as her safety is paramount to me." Calvin, still reeling from initial shock, was trying to process the scenes unfolding in the video where Molly joyfully interacted with the snake, her excitement palpable as she jumped and petted the reptile's head. However, the situation took a deeper turn. To clear up any misunderstandings about his character, Calvin decided to show more evidence of the bond one share with Molly. "I shared several videos of us enjoying simple pleasures like eating ice cream and pizza. These moments captured on video clearly showed the affection Molly felt towards me, her uncle. Despite these joyful times, I had always instructed Molly on the importance of keeping my work confidential due to its sensitive nature, which unfortunately led her to withhold information from her mother. This, in turn, stoked her mother's suspicions further. When Molly's mother, Calvin, finally confronted her. Molly's innocent description of the experience, mentioning a dark room and touching my snake, alarmed Calvin significantly. Upon my explanation, Calvin's emotions transitioned from shock to relief, and then to profound remorse. The police officers on standby visibly relaxed, thankful that the situation was not as dire as suspected, and the room's tense atmosphere shifted towards one of understanding. Albeit still slightly uneasy, I was deeply troubled by the entire ordeal. The misunderstanding had not only threatened the security of my confidential research but had also led to the demeaning experience of being interrogated by police at my own home. I sighed heavily, my look towards Calvin blending disappointment with sadness. "I'm so sorry, Calvin, please forgive me. I didn't know," Calvin implored, her voice heavy with remorse and embarrassment. Tears not of fear for Molly's safety, but from the guilt of having unjustly accused me. I remained silent for a moment, absorbing everything, while I recognized that Calvin's actions were driven by her protective maternal instincts. The incident had still taken a toll on me. "I understand, Calvin, but it was too much for me," I confessed, my voice laden with hurt. It took several days for me to fully forgive my sister-in-law. Reflecting on the incident, I acknowledged her genuine concern for her daughter. After a heartfelt conversation in which I explained more about my work and the critical need for confidentiality, I gradually accepted Calvin's apology, realizing the importance of clear communication and understanding within our family. Her actions were a vivid testament to a mother's protective instincts. In the wake of the incident, Calvin's trust in Calvin to look after Molly remained unshaken, reassured by his proven reliability. This trust helped to fortify the bond between uncle and niece, prompting Calvin to make a concerted effort to be more present in Calvin's life. United in their shared mourning of Hugh, they dedicated themselves to ensuring that Molly would grow up in a nurturing environment filled with love and family support. Despite the initial strain caused by the misunderstanding, they moved forward positively, with Calvin demonstrating his exceptional character. He devoted ample time and affection to the young girl, treating her as the precious living link to his dearly missed brother. He made it his priority to ensure that she always felt safe and happy while he continued his important research. For her part, Claire learned a crucial lesson about the importance of trust and the risks associated with hasty accusations. She came to understand the significance of verifying any suspicions before acting on them. This experience strengthened her relationship with the biologist, fostering a deeper, more respectful bond. As life progressed, the family's ties, built on trust and love, deepened further, highlighting the importance of truth, trust, and open communication. If you enjoyed this story, the next video that appears on your screen is likely to resonate with you as well. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, and activate the notification bell so you won't miss any of our upcoming heartwarming videos. See you in the next story.